you guys have been going through a difficult season, which isn't over for some. Some of you finished a few weeks ago. Some of you here on your summer vacation, just having a good time. And so I do hope that, that while you're here in Korea, that whether you're here for a long time or a very short time, that this will be a place where you can be encouraged and you can be challenged. We are starting a new series in the book of Esther. We started in the book of Romans from the beginning of the year. We just finished last week. And so we're getting a fresh start and we're going to something new, and you guys are excited. So to start off today, I wanted to ask you the question of, if you had unlimited wealth and power, what would you do? What would you do? Why is Mallory laughing?
Tell you later.
So what would you guys do if you had all the resources, all the ability in the world to do whatever you wanted? What are some things that you guys would do?
Have a good, half bad. Have a good, half bad.
Have a good what?
Have good, half bad.
Half good, half bad.
Good, bad.
Hot bath.
Okay.
50 good, 50 bad.
Okay. So what would you do? What would you do in this position if you could do, there was no limit to what you could do? What would you do?
Pay off my college loan and go on a world tour.
Oh, okay. So paying off of debt, going on a world tour, so seeing the world, right? Experiencing different things. Some people are nodding your heads. I guess we have some people that like travel here. Okay. Debt, of course, like I said before, like getting out of debt is probably one of the best feelings in the world. It took me 6 years to get out of my undergrad debt. Some of you guys who are in grad school and whatnot, it'll take you a lot longer. But okay, what else? What are some other things you would do if you had all the resources at your disposal? Is that it?
Solve world hunger.
Solve world hunger. Okay, so we have
Water
a
issues.
philanthropist over there. Joe would feed the hungry, right? And would reach out to the poor, right? Okay, those are some good things. Anything else?
Destroy wealth.
Destroy? How would you destroy wealth?
Because you have unlimited wealth, so it doesn't.
So you would make all wealth have no value? I don't know whether it's good or bad. Okay. The destruction of wealth. Okay, so just keep this in the back of your mind, because one of the characters that we're going to talk about when we get into this text is basically in that position, right? Of having unlimited power, unlimited wealth. And you'll see kind of what he does with that. So we're going to go, this is going to be a long passage. We're doing all of Esther 1 and 2. So bear with me, open up your Bibles, smartphones, look at the screen, but we're doing both chapters. So with that, starting with verse 1, this is what the Lord says. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. And in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials. The military leaders of Persia and Media, the princes and the nobles of the provinces were present. For a full 180 days he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet, lasting 7 days, in the enclosed garden of the king's palace, for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material to silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's liberality. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink with no restrictions, for the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. On the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in matters of law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the times and were closest to the king: Karshina, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Mersina, and Memucan, the 7 nobles of Persia and Media, who had special access to the king and were highest in the kingdom. According to the law, what must be done to Queen Vashti, he asked. She has not obeyed the command of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. I like how he talks about himself in the third person. Then Memucan replied in the presence of the king and the nobles: Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, and so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day, the Persians and Median women of the nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end of disrespect and discord. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Also let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Then when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands from the least to the greatest. The king and the nobles were pleased with this advice. So the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent dispatches to all parts of the kingdom, to each province in its own script, and to each people in their own language, proclaiming that every man should be ruler over his own household using his native tongue. Chapter 2. Later, when King Xerxes' fury had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. Then the king's personal attendants proposed, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in each province of his realm to bring all these beautiful young women into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Hegai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the young women who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti, young woman. This advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. Now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive with Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Hegai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Hegai, who had charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately he provided her with her beauty treatment and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. Before a young woman's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go there, and in the morning return to another part of the harem to the care of Shazgaz, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. When the turn came for Esther, the young woman Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abihail, to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Hegai, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the harem, suggested, and Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. But Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do. For she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles. All this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. All right. We made it, 2 chapters. Again, just to remind you, we are in the theme this year of Transformers, understanding how God is transforming us through the gospel, how we are continually being changed, but also understanding how we are meant to be agents of change and transformation unto others. And the reason why we're looking at Esther, because Esther is a great story of how an individual brought about significant change. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, one of the things I've noticed is, for whatever reason, I always tend to pick the hardest, most controversial books in the Bible. We just finished Romans. A lot of people would usually stay away from Romans because there's a lot of heavy material there, especially chapters 9 to 11. That was really difficult. A lot of people would never touch Revelation. We did a whole Bible study for 1.5 years on the book of Revelation. 1 Corinthians that we did. Like, all these different books we've chosen, for whatever reason, have been controversial. Same with Esther. I found out that Esther was actually the last book added to the Hebrew canon. So just like Revelation was the last book added to the New Testament canon, they kind of reluctantly put this into their Bible, right? It's the Old Testament. And one of the main reasons why is because there's never any mention of God in this entire text, right? In its original language. God is never mentioned throughout this entire book. Except in the Greek translation. Now this is kind of funny. The Greek translation, it's called the Septuagint. Septuagint means 70. Basically the legend is 70 different scholars translated the Hebrew into Greek, and then magically it was the same. They were all doing it independently of each other. But this is a weird thing. Their translation of Esther all had extra verses. Something like 70 verses. And it's all like extra stuff that makes it more religious. Like all of a sudden they start praying to God. It's like, that's not in the original text. So it's a little suspicious. Regardless, this book was so controversial that our Protestant fathers, Martin Luther and John Calvin, they made commentaries of the entire Bible, but both of them excluded Esther. And Luther even went and said, you know what, this shouldn't be in the Bible, this is a Jewish book. That's what Luther said, right? So this is a book that's actually been very controversial, and the thing is, it's all about the origin of Purim, and we'll get into Purim later when we get to that, but it's basically a national holiday in Israel. And it's a very popular holiday. Basically, it's celebrating how they were saved as a race. They were doomed for destruction. Someone saved them, which we'll show later is Esther. And it's a big holiday. Now, granted, it's not like a federal holiday, like the government still functions, but basically everyone takes the day off. There's like Purim food. They have their own special food. They have like these big festivals. They have like costumes, right? So this is like a combination of like Halloween, like for Korea it would be like March 1st, all these different things about this hero of Israel. And on that day they read the book of Esther twice, once in the morning, once at night. So this is a story that every Jewish person knows very well, because every year they read it at least twice out loud. And so she's like their folk hero. And this was honestly one of the, so when you look at the period before Christ came, there was a handful of books that were extremely popular. Isaiah was one, the book of Daniel, which we went over last year, was another, and Esther was the other. Right, if you guys remember Daniel was that crazy book, that apocalyptic book with all these like with these crazy visions and whatnot. That would kind of be like your science fiction novel, right? This was like your heroic story novel. So this was like a different genre, but another popular book during the time just before Christ. This was Esther. Now, again, there's a lot of stuff on here. I apologize, but this is just a rehash of what we talked about last year. The time period right now is, this is the Persian Empire. They were known as the Achaemenids. And this was, at that moment, the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Now, the Romans would be even greater than them, but at this moment, this is the greatest empire the world has ever seen. Very well developed, right? And during this time, there was a lot of radical things. They didn't allow slavery, and they also allowed religious freedom. So much so that one of the pinnacle moments was after 70 years of captivity, which is what God had told them that they were going to face. Darius, the emperor, he actually set the Jews free. And this is like the crescendo, the great climax of the Old Testament. And for you guys that are like big history buffs, this is honestly one of those moments in history that makes no sense. You're like, why did he do this? Like, why did he set them free? Why did he give them money, like gold, to actually rebuild their temple? And for me, when I was studying on my Western Civ, like this was one of the things that just it didn't make any sense. But for Israelites, for Jews, this is like one of their greatest moments of when God finally gave them the freedom, the release from 70 years that they had been wishing for so long. Now, another thing about Persia was that the law actually superseded the emperor. So if the emperor made a command, he made an edict, he could not take it back. Right? We saw this in the book of Daniel, when the lion's den, when they made an edict that everyone had to pray to the king, and Daniel was caught praying to God, and he had to be thrown into the lion's den. The emperor was trying his best to get him out of that situation, because he loved Daniel. But he couldn't. He was powerless, because he had signed a decree. And that's why Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, but God delivered him from that. In the same way, we will see that in the book of Esther. Any edict, any command. Yeah, all right. Any command, if you were asleep now, welcome. now, the law was the thing that no emperor could repeal. And you will see this in this book. Every time an action is made, an edict is created, it can't be repealed. So, getting into the story, and I'm sorry there's so much background, but I really want to get you guys into the context of the story. This story starts in Xerxes. Xerxes was king after Darius. So the Jews have already been set free. Most of them have already gone back. They're going back, they're rebuilding the temple, they're going back to their former lives. But for whatever reason, this story is about that remnant population that decided to stay. So this is in Susa, this is the capital of this empire. These are the people, they could have gone back. But they chose, you know what, we're going to stay here in Susa and have a life here. So this is a minority population that in many ways had very little power. Now this passage, or this book, talks a lot about banquets. So much so that this is the most occurrences of banquets in the entire Old Testament. 20 times. The word only comes up 24 more times in the entire Old Testament, right? Now banquet, you're going to see it every single chapter, banquet, banquet, banquet. But anyway, banquets usually have a very important symbolism, and it usually refers to salvation. But we will see in this text a very different meaning of what banquets are. Now, when I asked that question, what would you do if you had unlimited power, unlimited wealth? What did this guy do? He threw a big party for 180 days, 6 months, right? And this was the first party, the 6-month party was for the nobles. So it wasn't for everybody, but for 6 months, they just hung out, he's showing off, he's like, hey, check out my stuff, right? He's like, it's pretty nice, right? He's like, they're just hanging out for 6 months. Think about that. Think about like, first off, a party takes a lot of work, right? For any of you that ever host people at your place, you're tired afterwards, right? But this guy did it for 6 months. And then after that, he had another 7-day banquet for everybody. This is the one that anyone could come to. And basically, it was like, like it was an open bar. Basically, you could drink as much as you wanted. right? And so basically his intention was to get the entire capital city drunk in 7 days, right? So like think about every like crazy movie that you see, like like Animal House, all these like frat movies, right? Of people just having these excessive parties. This is what he did for not only 6 months, but for another 7 days after that, for 187 days. That was the choice he made. He's like, I got power, I got wealth, I'm going to show it by throwing the biggest party this world has ever seen. Okay? Now, then he makes a demand. So in the high point, when he is probably as drunk as he's ever been in his life, he's like, all right, where's Vashti? I want Vashti to come over here. Right? Now, one of the things, when it says that he was asking her to come with just her crown, or wearing her crown, basically a lot of people believe she was supposed to come with nothing else on, just her crown, and to show off her beauty to the entire, to the entire city, right? And then some of the scholars, some scholars are like, she said no because it was inappropriate, right? She didn't want to come naked, right? Other people say like, of course she wanted to be naked. Of course she wanted to show herself off, but she probably had some type of skin condition. I don't know. There are a lot of different theories. The Bible doesn't really tell us why she says no. But you kind of sense that maybe he was being inappropriate. Okay? And so basically what chapter 1 is showing us is you're being shown this picture of someone abusing the wealth and power that they have to show off. And at the end of the day, what really comes out of that is brokenness, right? This wife of his turns him down, and in front of everyone, he's like, he's basically shamed. And so he responds with anger, and he asks his buddies what he should do, and they're like, hey man, you should kick her out. And so he gives this edict. And so basically what chapter 1 is showing us, this is the best the world has to offer. If you have all the resources in the world, and you could do everything you wanted, even so, that will never please you. At the end of the day, you can show off to everyone how great you are, but at the end of the day, you will still feel empty and broken inside. I don't know I don't know if any of you guys watch like American football, but I'm a big football guy. And there's this player, Jerry Rice. They call him the GOAT, the greatest of all time. One of the best players who has ever existed in the game. This guy, he's a good-looking guy. He's very gifted. He has every single record possible for his position. And so this guy is famous, he's wealthy, he's got a beautiful wife. And people have gone on record to ask him like, hey, how's your life? Like, you have everything. And on record he said like, he feels empty. Right? This is someone that people idolize and look up to. Even like NBA, like Michael Jordan was like the face of the NBA and was the hero of the entire world. Honestly, I look at him now and I'm like, man, he's gone through a hard time. There's like a meme of like him crying that's like on the internet all over the place. Anyway, regardless, these people that we worship, these people that we see, it's just like chapter 1. These people that we idolize, at the end of the day, all you see is brokenness. Like how many of these famous couples that we've seen end in divorce? Right? Like we see this every single day in every sector that we know of. And this is no different in chapter 1. Now chapter 2, Xerxes talks about he finally gets over his anger. I don't know if it's the next day, he wakes up hungover, he's like, oh, what did I do? Like, it could be the next day, it could be many months from then, I don't know. But he wakes up and he finds out, oh man, or it talks about how he remembers. He remembers his queen. He remembers what she did. He remembers how he responds. And to me, I read that text, the beginning of chapter 2, and I see a guy who regrets what he did. Because he can't take it back. Like I said before, anytime he issues an edict, it cannot be revoked. So he has issued an edict that his wife is kicked out of his presence forever. So what I sense, like honestly, as I read chapters 1 and 2, and I look at this character Xerxes, I feel bad for him. I don't know, I empathize with the guy. It's only, in the beginning, it's his 3rd year of his reign. This is this young king. It's not like there is emperor school, where like people can teach him like, hey, this is how you run an empire. Like, he doesn't know what he's doing, right? Why else would he have a 6-month party? he's just a young kid who has no idea what he's doing. He reacts because his wife doesn't do what he wants, and now he's like, oh man, what have I done? I feel bad for the guy. He realizes that he made a big mistake. Now, we're shown into what chapter 2 they call a beauty pageant, like Miss Persia, right, where they're bringing all these beautiful girls. It's not that. I'll get into that. It's actually not a good thing. But we're introduced now to these new characters, and so we see Mordecai and Hadassah, also known as Esther, and we're introduced to these Jews that, like I said before, they are the minority, but they're also underprivileged, right? If you look at the text, it seems like people don't know who Jews are, which is odd because before they were a very important part of this kingdom. Now most of them have gone back to Israel. People have forgotten who they are. Right? Now I grew up in the States as an Asian American. We're a minority, although like in my place in Maryland, we're the #1 minority, which is really weird. Like they had to hire all these ESL teachers because these Koreans couldn't speak English, and so like we're like the #1 minority in my neighborhood, which is really weird. But regardless, growing up in America, being a minority, they have what they call affirmative action or equal opportunity, right? And so especially when you're applying to colleges, your ethnicity has a big role in whether you get into schools or not, right? Almost more so than your academic achievements, right? So like, people will talk about how like, there's someone who has like 1/16 like Native American blood, and they'll check off Native American, and like next thing you know they're going to Harvard, and you're like, dude, you're like a C student, what the heck? And so like, people are always complaining about that. But growing up as an Asian American, we're not an underprivileged minority. So actually, by checking off Asian in my ethnicity, it actually probably hurt me when I was applying to colleges, because I know from my school we have way too many Asians. So like another one, okay, let's get someone else. So like, that's my own experience as a quote unquote minority, but I wasn't an underprivileged one. But these Jews, they were probably forgotten about. There's a reason why Mordecai kept telling Esther, hey, don't let them know you're a Jew, because it probably would have hurt her, especially her chances of becoming queen. Now, Esther ends up winning the favor of the head eunuch, and next thing you know, you see her, she acts very wisely. The thing with Esther is she does everything right. But one of the things is the whole process of what was going on. This actually wasn't a good thing. Most of these girls, this was actually a very bad thing for them. First off, they were picked, and they went through 12 months of beauty school, right? 12 months. Now, I know we have people that are into makeup, and like 12 months is pretty intense, right? Like think about, I know like, they have shows like Extreme Makeover. I know like there were like these trashy shows like Jenny Jones where they would like take these like, ugly ducklings, and all of a sudden like they come back and you're like, whoa. This is that's just like a couple of days. This is like 12 months, a whole year. And so these women are being brought in, they're going through this beauty training and this beautification, and it all comes down to one night. Basically, they're brought to the king, he gets one night with them, and then they're only allowed back if he remembers their name and calls for them, right? Now 4 years passes before he finds Esther. So this is at least 1,000 some odd women. And there's no way this guy remembers all these girls' names, right? So the vast majority of these girls, their fate was they went through this 12 months, they saw the king, and then they lived in his harem as a concubine for the rest of their lives, and they would probably never see him again. It's a very lonely life. Now granted, they're getting fed and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, like, that would not be a fun life to live. A forgotten concubine. That's most of them ended up that way. But at the end of the day, 4 years passes. Lonely Xerxes finally finds his wife. Now for him, maybe in the beginning he might have liked it. So I get to see a girl every night. 4 years of that, I'm sure got old. I don't know. Maybe some guys can do that for 4 years. But yeah, I'm sure at the end of the day, he was relieved to finally find someone that he loved. So he went through 4 years of this. Now for myself, you guys know I'm not married, so 4 years is nothing. So whatever, Xerxes, get over it. But anyway, he loves her so much that he not only throws another banquet, but he gives her a holiday, right? It's Esther Day, yay! I found my wife, yay, Esther Day. And so basically you have this crescendo. And so chapter 1, you are shown the emptiness of what the world offers. Chapter 2, you are shown rising hope. You're seeing a rags to riches story of an orphan girl, a girl that has been dealt a very difficult situation, and now she is the top female in the entire kingdom. Right? Now she's the queen. Now it ends with Mordecai. Now Mordecai, honestly, I have no idea what this guy's job is. Doesn't tell us. It seems like he's just sitting around doing nothing. And he's like listening to people. What do you say? And like, honestly, like later on, you see that he gets a position. But for all I know, in chapter 1 and like chapter 2, this guy's like a homeless man, right? He's like sitting at the gate, listening to everybody. Regardless, he uncovers this plot. This plot ends up being true. He gets some credit, but that's it. This is just a footnote for us to remember for later on, because it's going to come into play later on. Now, like I said before, Esther was dealt a very difficult hand. She was an orphan and from a people group that was underrepresented, underprivileged, and in many ways probably oppressed. She was in a difficult situation, but God showed her favor, and He raised her up to the highest position that she could ever be in the universe at that time. And so really what the book of Esther is, there is no mention of God, but everything is tailored in such an amazing way that everything lines up perfectly, that if you read the book of Esther, it only makes sense when you apply, God did this. Right? So even though there's this invisibility of God, there's only the things that happen could only have happened through God. Now, one of the things about this text is that it never really makes that much mention of the faith of Mordecai and Esther. So for all I know, they might not have even had a very strong faith. Because if you think about it, they are like 2nd, 3rd, and 4th generation Jews, right? They're very far removed. They've never seen the temple. They've never actually experienced what it means to worship the God of Israel. And honestly, brothers and sisters, some of us might be in a similar situation where we are 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation believers, and we have not had the same level of experience of faith as some of our forefathers. We look at our parents, we look at our grandparents, and we're like, wow, they had such a powerful, wonderful faith. And you're like, but for me, like, it seems like I don't really hear God. I don't really see God. I don't really understand what they had. So for some of us, we might wrestle with that same thing. And I think these characters probably had that same issue of like, where is God? Yeah, God let people go back to Israel, but where is He for me? I'm stuck here in Susa. But what we see through the text is that God orchestrates things in such a way that it's only possible by Him. And it doesn't matter about the faith of the people that He's doing it for. So what I want to tell you, brothers and sisters, is that even though God might seem like He's not talking, even though it might seem like God is very far away from your life, what this book tells us is that He's always there. He's always working. He is always orchestrating. And the other thing I want to tell you is it doesn't matter about your faith. Like, yeah, your faith does matter, but at the same time, God doesn't just move for those that have this tremendous faith in Him. But the point is, are we able to see God in others? Are we looking for God in others? He is always there. I will tell you that right now. But the question is, are you looking for Him? Sometimes it takes a while for us to see what God has been doing all this time. And really what we're going to see in the book of Esther is God gives so much favor to this person. He puts her in a position where she can have influence for a very important moment in the history of Israel. And brothers and sisters, I want to say the same thing to you. God is opening doors for many of you. I know many of you are getting job opportunities, or you're getting into good schools. God is opening doors, and He's doing that so that you can be in a position when it's time for you to obey, you can. But the question is, are you going to be listening for Him? even when it seems like he's not there, even when it seems like he's very far away. So that's what we're going to see in this book. We're going to see the rise of the sister, and we are going to see her answering the call to action. Like Esther, when we get to the point where she makes a stand, you're like, wow, that's Moshe's like this girl, like you know, that's wow. Like for her to be that brave, you're just like wow. So my hope for you guys, brothers and sisters, is that when those moments come where you sense that God is nudging you and encouraging you to do certain things, that you would recognize that He has always been faithful to you, and that you too would be willing to be Moshe's like Esther. All right, let's take some time to pray. I'll go ahead and close. I just want you to take a moment to just take a moment to dwell on the things that were present in chapter 1 and 2. You know, if this world has ever looked like something lustrous and beautiful and desirable to you, I just want you to pray that God would show the reality. That if we just pursue what the world desires, that we just pursue what the world shows us is good, that it will just lead us to emptiness and loneliness. And I pray that instead, I want you to instead to pray that you would see the hope in a God that gives favor to those that don't deserve it. So let's pray that God would show us the reality of the world and help us to instead see the hope that we have in Him. Let's pray.